Before ordination, one of the requirements that I had to fulfill was something called clinical pastoral education, or CPE. CPE can happen in a hospital setting, in a prison setting, sometimes in a shelter, sometimes in an after-school program. The settings and sites vary. Mine was in a hospital setting. And so I was a chaplain intern, and I was in a group for supervision. I had one-on-one supervision, and about 5 hours a week, I would go to the hospital, and I had an assigned floor. My floor was general surgery, and I would cold call, knock on doors. Hi, I'm Debbie. I'm one of the chaplains. Would you like to talk? And I would talk with patients if they wanted, pray with them if they wanted. And then about once a week, I was on call. So from 6 o'clock at night until 8 o'clock in the morning, I was the only chaplain in a hospital with 500 beds. And it happened to be that on my rotations, I had an average of 3 deaths per night. The most I had was 6, but regularly 3 deaths per night. Sometimes infant losses, miscarriages, later term and pregnancy losses, but adults of every age and stage. Generally not children outside of infants because they were at Children's Hospital, but I was dealing with death regularly. I was sort of enmeshed in it and dealing with grief and loss. And then in the first church that I served, it was in a retirement community that had aged. 90 was young, and we dealt with 2 or 3 deaths a week in that church. And I was the associate working with the senior and regularly would work with folks in the community. Working with folks in the dying process, working with families who are grieving has been inherent to my ministry for 20 years now. It's just part of what I do. And some folks say, oh, I could never do what you do, being that close to death. And it is a hard thing, but it's also a holy space. And for me, being invited into those holy spaces has been a privilege. And it's one where I've learned a lot about how we grieve, about how we die, about how we do life. And in recent weeks, I've had occasion to talk with a variety of folks about death. People who are on hospice, people who are companioning someone who is in the dying process, people who are grieving the loss of a loved one for various stages, maybe in the immediate wake of death, maybe months later, maybe even years later. And there's no perfect way to do it. Know that grief is a messy process, both on the front side and the back side about how we do it. But there are ways that we can lean into the emotions, where we can lean into the uncertainties and the fears that we have, and really have some powerful conversations. And so I want us to begin thinking about the ways that we embrace both life and death in ways that help us to live well, and hopefully ways that help us to say goodbye well. So with this devotional, I'm going to leave you some questions, and I invite you to reflect on those things. Take some time, maybe write out your answers, maybe have a conversation with somebody about them. Maybe critically important, talk to a loved one. What are your opinions and thoughts? Some of the things I would encourage you to think about are, if I were planning my service, what would I include? Are there particular songs or hymns that you would want included? Do you have particular scripture passages that you like, or poetry that you like? It can be healing for your family to think through those things and decide those things for you, but sometimes it can be really hard. They don't know, and they wish they knew which hymns you loved, which scriptures you loved. And so if you have particulars, write them down, offer them to your loved ones so that they might know when it's that time what to include. I would ask, are there things that you wish you could say to those that you know and love? Maybe it's just leaving an affirmation, maybe a video like this that you could offer to somebody, maybe a letter or a card that you write, telling your kids or your spouse or your grandkids or an aunt or an uncle or a best friend, these are the things I hope you know. These are the things I want to say to you. These are the things I love about you. These are the things I appreciate about you. These are some of my favorite memories. Give them that gift of sharing with them. We aren't guaranteed tomorrow. So if you knew that your time was coming, what are the things that you might say to someone else? Are there relationships that need forgiveness and reconciliation? Life is messy, relationships are hard, family can be hard. Are there places and relationships that really need a healing touch? I would invite you first and foremost to pray about those. Asking God for wisdom about what conversation needs to be had, what words might be said, which things maybe you can't touch or heal. And so instead asking God to heal those things that are beyond your reach. There's more I could say about death and dying in that process, but I'll leave us with those just as a starting place, a time for reflection, not to be morbid or somber, but just to be thoughtful about how we live in this world and maybe how we prepare for the when we die. Take care, friends.